the exploration of a creative path is one of the most challenging, I think, but also one of the most fulfilling. Like, you don't know what comes next.
It's always the moments where you are sort of able to let go of control and just allow the work to unfold a little bit. Some days it is like you do just have to push yourself through and get to the other side, and other days it's you need to take a break and it's hard to know which avenue to follow. I just think it's really important to have creative hobbies that you're not trying to make money at. I do. I love cooking. I love gardening. And I also love dancing. Really, just the whole ethos behind my work is trying to find ways to make art that aren't going to harm the planet, and just approaching my work from the idea of working within a circular economy.
Hey, you guys, welcome back to the Arts to Hearts podcast. This is your host, Charuka, and I'm very, very excited to be back on the podcast again. And honestly, the podcast is one of my favorite things to do, favorite place to be in. And, I say, I love having conversations and I'm very, very curious and, keep sharing on what I think. And I think having a conversation is one of the most fluid forms. It's like food for thought for me. It helps me grow. And I know in that process, I'm able to, help others. And I don't think there is any other better win-win situation. But if you're a regular listener, I am very, very grateful. Thank you so much for being here. If you're watching this on YouTube, I am very, very grateful for you joining us here in my studio, which I have some news and updates about. But okay, I'll get that too. And if you are a new listener, welcome to the Arts to Hearts community. I am very, very excited to have you here. A warm welcome, a big hug, and lots of love. This is just the beginning. You can, there's so much that we have for you here from this podcast with over 150, 200 episodes now to our website, which is just so full of resource, and we are only making it better from here, making it more intimate, more exclusive, and a lot more based learning and information that is already there. We're processing it, we're putting it together so that things become easier for you. So we have our publications, we have our books, ATH Magazine, the Studio Visit book, the Call for Art, which is the Studio Visit book Call for Art, which is actually going for now. And you have less than 2 weeks, I think, to actually submit your work. On that note, I actually have one of the samples that I am working on for the Studio Visit book, which is here. I'm very excited. This isn't the final work because I think I rejected it. I still am figuring out. I didn't like the finish of this one as much. This is a hard book cover. So with the Studio Visit book, we promised, and this artwork is by Melissa. This is the third sample. I think publishing a book has so many processes. The sampling takes a lot of time for me, but I'm very stringent with the kind of quality I want to make, specifically when I'm doing these on pre-order. So these are the pre-order, and you still can get your hands on the pre-order book, I think, for a week or week at most now, because once we do these limited pre-orders, then we will not be doing pre-orders, and you can buy the regular print copy. The pre-order will come with some exclusive designer, designs that we're doing. And let me show you. Okay. So this time I'm thinking about adding like a cover photo here inside as well. So just to give you like, a nice print that you can later on maybe frame and do something with it. And that's Ashley Longshore. We have her interview in the magazine. Okay. Okay. Sorry, please permit me. Anyone who's watching this can see on YouTube that I have my book in the hand and I'm showing you around, but probably not for people who are listening on the audio. But just for your description, I have the Studio Visit book sample, which is the third sample. This isn't the final sample because I think I'm going to take this quality a lot more notch higher. and I want to have a nice book cover in the sense of a, the jacket, and then, of course, a better cover in the sense of the quality, and, the book in itself. So I think it looks nice, but a lot more thicker and heavier. If you see, we have a wonderful, wonderful. Oh, I love. That's how I imagined this book, and I think I'd like to keep it like that. You have my interview. I just love print. I love. We have Danny Krisa, aka Jealous Curator, who actually, what do I, who actually curated this book for us, and it was such an amazing experience. Daniel is just so kind and wonderful to work with, and we have her studio visit as well. It's a very very minimal design uh, work, and you just focus on the images, you focus on the work. It's We have another artist called Anastasia Thompson. Here you go. Yeah. So it's an exciting process. Honestly, I really really enjoy making these books, designing these books, editing these books. I do a lot of the work myself, with the help of my team for sure. But it's a very exciting process. But it's a very very long process from the call for art to actually publishing a book. It takes I mean 4 months, and we're a small independent publishing, so of course it's a lot of work behind the scenes for us, and a lot of money that goes into it. And I really want to say a big thank you for everyone who supports us in these projects, to be able to create these opportunities, to be able to create all of this. And thank you so much if you've ever participated, ever submitted to a call for art, bought a book, give us a shout out, or all all kind of support, always appreciated. So let me remind you, we are actually doing a call for art for the second issue of this book, which will be released in a couple of months from now. And the next edition is being curated by my favorite cat, who's the founder of Create Magazine, and she's a lovely, lovely soul. And I always love what she curates, and we always do some really amazing work together. So I'm very excited about that. So if you want to be published in the next edition, which is the volume 2 of the Studio Visit book, you make sure that you submit your work. I think it's last 10 days or 12 days left, and the deadline will close. You won't be able to submit any longer after that. And if you want to get your hand on the volume 1, which is this, a lot more better version with a pre-order that we are doing currently, make sure that you have last week to get to the pre-order. Make sure you place an order, and get your hands on on this special edition printed by us, and we'll send you all across the world. And on that note, I would like to introduce you to my guest for today. So for today, I thought, why not take you, not only like show you the book, but actually take you inside it. Yeah. So I'm going to take you inside one of the artist studio today with me. Just gave you a glimpse, and I think I love the publication. And it's for me, it's not this or that. I think everything that we do has so much value of its own. I love the publications, the whole print, and everything. But I also love the intimate conversations we have on the podcast, on YouTube channel, and how we share in our articles, where you can really look at these images. So it's a very very combined experience. You can have a whole look and feel of it into it. So yeah, I'm about to tell you that who I have as a guest today. So I have Nicole Young, who's one of the studio visit artists here in the studio with you on the podcast right now. Nicole is a brilliant, wonderful young women artist, textile artist, and she works with natural dyes. And I found her imagery is beautiful. I think once you see the interview, even in print, you'd agree what I'm saying. She has such a wonderful, wonderful, energy. And in the book, we also ask her about her experiences in creating in different spaces. And she has a she's I really liked her journey. I really liked what she answered, and I thought, why not take it one step further and bring her on the podcast and do a interview with her. So that's what we're doing today. And if you want to know and read her interview, make sure you pre-order your book. Yes, I'm going to keep that repeating annoyingly because please, we've put a lot of effort and work into this. I want as many people who can get their hands on this book, as many people possible. Yes. So I asked in the interview to Nicole, in the book itself, we asked 5 questions, 5 small bullet questions. What is your most prized possession in the studio? And she says, my sewing machine. It belonged to my grandmother and feels good to be making my work with a tool that a woman who came before me used. And I love this answer. I absolutely love this. And if you know me, you know why. And I thought, why not? Why not take this one step further? So, are you ready? Because I'm going to take you with me in the studio of Nicole Young. Come, let's go. Okay, welcome to the podcast, Nicole. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. And I'm very excited to have you. And I was just introducing you before, we got here. I'm very, very excited to have you here. And this is not the first time that I am directly, indirectly interviewing you. You are one of the artists in our volume one of the studio visit book. While we were working on the wireframes and, all of that, you were actually the first artist we worked on. And yours was the template that we actually, moved around.
Oh, cool.
I think your imagery, and I think that is, again, that is one of the most, when you're designing books and while you're submitting your work to different open calls, is how also you present your work. And I think the imagery that you have, it's even in the print, it looks beautiful. And I wanted to really take our interview further and just speak to you, but before we get that into that, how about you introduce yourself for people who are listening to this podcast and can touch base.
Absolutely, sounds good. So I'm a visual artist based in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I make work that's focused around environmentalism and materiality. So I do um, all of my pigments that I make for painting are all naturally derived. I do a lot of work with textiles, dyeing fabrics, and sewing them together. So I primarily make paintings, but I also do installation work and drawing and some smaller textile-based pieces. And really, just the whole ethos behind my work is trying to find ways to make art that aren't going to harm the planet and um, just approaching my work from the idea of working within a circular economy. So, not creating any waste and not contributing to, polluting the planet. And so, anytime I'm working with large textiles or canvas, I'll always save the leftovers and they'll get used in a later piece. And that's how I build my works.
That is absolutely, absolutely amazing. And I think not a lot of us are as conscious as we should be when it comes to, protecting our planet and thinking, for a longer run. But I think when I was first thing that I actually have, and so the first image that we have of you and the first image we actually added on the book was this one, which was in the white jumpsuit that you have, which for your entire photo. And the reason, like the other day, I was looking at one of your reels and I saw that you actually dyed it.
Yeah.
Are you wearing the same one, yeah, right now? Because I can see the color.
No, this is a shirt, unfortunately. I should have worn that one.
Oh no, I love that. And I love how, because I have a very deep connection with textiles myself. Tell me something. Um what your practice looks like today, you know? Were you someone who was always as conscious as you are today? And did your work also inherited that since the beginning, or it just took shape eventually?
Yeah, so I've been painting now for about 16 years. And when I first started painting, I was working primarily in acrylics. And then I think around 2016, I started getting really involved in the zero waste movement. And so um, I worked with activist groups and I started eliminating all of this waste from my personal life. And then I sort of turned around and realized that while I was eliminating single use plastics, from one area of my life, I was then just turning around and painting with plastic because that's essentially what acrylic paint is, right? So then, yeah, that kind of led me to researching ways that I could make pigments out of things like acorns and oxidized copper and plants from my garden and food waste scraps. And so it just sort of evolved from the way my kind of personal approach to living in the world. Um, yeah, so it just, yeah, it evolved through a long process of, um, yeah, changing my lifestyle and to suit my values.
And yeah, I think, something that I keep constantly saying that, our art is an extension of who we are. And as we change and evolve, our work also changes and evolves. And it's always reflecting and talking about different stages of life that we are going through and what we are experiencing and feeling along with that. So it's very nice when I see your work also, and I as when I speak to you also, it's not like this isn't like, it's not this or that. It is like a whole combination that I can see with, let's say very little minute details, like, how you the life choices, from the clothes choices, from what you truly are making, everything comes together and, it speaks one language. When you started getting into, this movement, um, how at what point did you feel like your work was changing and being impacted by that? And I just want to hear your experience because I think a lot of artists feel very overwhelmed and scared of that evolution and change. Specifically, while you're having a major change in your work and you feel like you're changing your mediums and, your own values and, let's say what you were making about. Um, can you recall a period where you experienced something similar and how did you work through that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was probably about 2 years into my zero waste journey that I started changing my art practice. And I think it definitely took a while because there's certain colors that you can't get out of natural pigments. So it was like, well, if I, wanted to paint something with neon colors, like that wouldn't really be an option for me anymore. And so it was definitely a long process of like just kind of subtly adding things here and there. And um, yeah, like I have a lot of pieces that maybe one element of the piece was a natural ink and the rest of it was acrylics. And so it was just a very, very slow progression. And but yeah, it's been really, really valuable for me personally. I think my work is quite different from how it was when I was painting only in acrylics, but I think it's so much better. And I think a big part of that is because it's so true to me and so aligned with my values. And um, I feel like I've touched on something really unique in my work now because I'm more focused on um, you know, all of these elements that are really specific to me.
Yeah, I agree. Um, can you take us through some of your process of how you approach your work? And since this is the Studio Visit Book Edition special episode, let's also talk about how do you inculcate this practice within your studio? And I'm sure Why I'm asking this? Because of course we're definitely um, want to learn about more about your practice, but also I think it's such an important question because all of us, I think anyone who's listening to this episode, including me, we can all learn something how we can make our practices a lot more sustainable, our studio processes. So how about you take us through how your process is and how much intention and how you're making it a lot more sustainable.
Yeah, let's see. So one of the biggest things I think has helped me is I never really used to be a big sketcher. Like when I was in university, I didn't really enjoy sketching. I just wanted to get to the main event. And now that I've started doing this process that has a lot more sewing involved, I actually have started making little like digital mock-ups of my pieces because I was finding that I was just making so many mistakes and having to start again and stitch rip and all of these things. And um, yeah, so it's almost like if you're making a garment and you have a pattern for the garment you're making, it's like I'm making patterns for my pieces. So that's really helped in terms of like not having as many um, yeah, not having as many things that go to waste because I'm kind of planning ahead a little bit more than I used to. Um, yeah, what else do I do? I also do a lot of like um, paintings that are maybe older and just don't really resonate with me anymore. I'll often take those apart and cut them up and sew them back together to create new pieces. Um, And then I am also always saving the materials that I work with. So something I've started doing recently is just saving even like the tiniest little pieces of thread that come off of the fabrics I use. And I'm making these little like compositions out of thread. So they almost look like drawings, but they're made out of like thread waste.
Oh, wow. That is so interesting, actually. That's sometimes we don't know the potential of what, how something so little can, you know, be. How do you approach your work? And, I'm also particularly interested about, the pigment making. You make your own natural pigments. And I mean, I remember I follow quite a few people on Instagram and I really love how, I don't remember her name. Of course, I know Emily Jefford, and she does a lot of natural pigments, but also someone I'm very bad at names. But I really love how people, scavenge and they go through like these mountains and like, a lot into the nature. What is your process like? How are you like making these pigments and how do you find them?
Yeah, so I think I first got into ink making from an artist and ink maker based in Toronto named Jason Logan, and he's written this book. It's called Make Ink, and it's got all kinds of different natural ink recipes that he makes from just items he finds and forages. So that's something I do every so often. And I'm also really lucky to have a community that is incredibly supportive. So often people will just bring me, like, my sister-in-law brought me, like, there was some sort of berry off of her parents' tree. And so I did experiments with making something with that. And so yeah, often I just get things given to me and I get to experiment with them. And I'm also like my big passion outside of art making is cooking. So there's a lot of different dyes and things that you can make from food waste. So that's always kind of fun for me because I can combine those two things that I get excited about. So yeah, I would say most of my pigments come from food waste. And then apart from that, there's also a really wonderful dye supplier in Vancouver. They're called Maiwa Natural Dye. And so they have a lot of things that I just like couldn't source on my own. Like There's this one dye, it's made from cochineal, and it's like a type of bug that I think are harvested from a type of cactus. And they make this like beautiful, like vibrant red to pink color. So that's an item that I wouldn't necessarily be able to go out and forage on my own. So I get sources from them as well.
That is so wonderful. And I don't know if you know about this in about India, but um, India, of course, is a huge, like it's an epitome of when it comes to craft and textile. And ever since, like while I was growing up, and people who grow up here in India in schools, and while we were being taught crafts and arts, one of the most important resource has always been not only this, but anything else has been our kitchen. And the spices we use, the food we eat. And I, as you were saying this, I could only think about while I was young and I was still in school, we used to have this class, and we have learned like so many different techniques when it came to, I don't know if you've heard about batik, which is another relief and printing technique. And or everything is naturally made. And as a culture, we always source things from the nature and naturally. So I think that would be very interesting for you to actually get into, maybe.
Yeah, I've always wanted to visit India. It's definitely on my list, and that's yeah, definitely an appealing part of it is all the textiles and dyes and color.
Yeah, and the block printing, and like I think it will be, that would, yeah, it would be like a Disneyland for you, I'm sure.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, tell me something. Another question that we asked you in the book itself, and we've asked all our artists, is how do you think, and when we call this as a studio visit book, and I remember while we were, conceptualizing this book and thinking about what it could be, and we came up with the idea of the studio visit book, and a lot of people thought that it meant that we had to had like, bigger studios and those fancy shoots, and like, a lot of a very general perception. But and that is great, and we love all of that. But also the idea came from the sense of how I think studios for artists are not physical spaces only. It is a lot of our mental mindset, um, things that are happening in our head, that we're constantly moving from here and there, and and also like the evolution of that process. Like I remember when I started my first, whatever that could be, from my bed. And honestly, I still enjoy working from my bed a lot. I love working from my bed, even though I don't care how big my studio can get, but I'd really love working from my bed every now and then. And we asked you a question, that how has your studio um evolved and changed, and how you've been making in different parts. Can you take me through your earliest memory of what would you recall as your studio first, the earliest, however young you think, what would be that for you?
Yeah. My earliest studio, I guess like realistically, I could consider my like teenage bedroom was probably my first studio because really, I've just always been happiest when I'm making something. And so I would spend just hours and hours in my bedroom, like writing songs and drawing. And I like made a little magazine for a little while, and I would go to thrift stores and buy fabric and clothing and take them apart and put them back together. And so, yeah, so probably my teenage bedroom would have been my first studio. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that some people like when I first saw the call for the studio book, I hesitated a little bit applying because I was like, oh, well, I don't have like a bright, white, beautiful studio right now. Like, I don't have perfect photographs of it. And, are they even going to want me for this book? And then, I thought about it and I was kind of like, well, I'm in a unique position where I do have studio space, and then I also have my kitchen is also my studio, and my garden is also my studio. So yeah, that's why I kind of ended up submitting to the book, because I thought yeah, I might offer something a little unique to the book.
Yeah, you absolutely did, and we are more than grateful to have you, and we finally have you in the book. And I think what stood out, and I think this is something I always feel like it could help other people who are always applying to different projects. Is I think your submission was also very well put together. Um, your own when you know anyone who's going to order the book would be able to see that the imagery that you shared also really reflected um, the work that you're doing in the sense of the essence of it. So that was very impressive, and I think I really liked how it was unique, and it had something different to offer. And how about in the book also we touched that on the surface of how about can you also talk a little bit about what your current studio feels like to you? How long you've been working, let's say for 16 years, how long have you come? How does that feel like?
Yeah, so my current studio is it's in Olympic Village in Vancouver, and it's a shared studio space with, I think there's around 13 of us in there right now. And yeah, it's such an inspiring space to be in. All of the artists that I share space with are just really inspiring in terms of the work that they're making, and also just so dedicated and motivated in their craft. So it just is such a beautiful space to be a part of, and everyone really like helps each other out and lets each other know about opportunities that are coming up. And it's just a really, yeah, it's a really beautiful space to be in, and I feel really lucky to be in there.
I love that. What is that one thing that you feel is very important for you to make something your own studio?
I am a pretty solitary person, so I do like to try to catch the studio, um, to have some kind of alone and quiet time in there by myself. So I usually tend to get there early in the morning, and I can just have a few hours to myself in the studio. And then, most other people show up around like 10 or 11. So I can kind of ease into my day with a little bit of alone time, and then more time with the other artists. Um, yeah, and something that makes it is the most. I guess probably the biggest thing for me too is just having the right music to listen to. I think music is really important to me when I'm painting. I think it is for a lot of artists.
Yes, I think it's like setting the tone and you know right, let me see. We asked you what is your go-to music, and you said Alela Diane.
Yeah, so she's a folk singer based in Portland. And her music just resonates with me so much, and I really enjoy, um, when I'm alone in the studio, singing while I'm painting. And so I just really like to sing along to her music, and yeah, and paint.
How do you make sure that I think we all have our high days and low days and the lulls. Um, I myself get into this rut a lot of times, feeling uninspired. Um, Sometimes I really have to push myself on to I think when things get too serious, sometimes in that process, we often forget to have fun. And for someone like me, I think that gets really hard. And I have to for me, my studio needs to be like that space that really brings the best out of me in the sense of also like a happy, that kind of that side of me. What do you do? Do you have any practices, any processes, any beliefs on how how you keep your studio space a more positive and inspired space, and that can lift you up, that can keep you inspired, and lift your spirits?
It's such a fine line because, like, some days, I think as artists, we all go through that. And some days it is like you do just have to push yourself through and get to the other side. And other days it's you need to take a break and it's hard to know which avenue to follow. So something I always try to do is, like, if I'm working on a larger project and it's not going the way I'm hoping or expecting, I always try to have something small to work on instead, so I can just take a break from that, work on a small little something that doesn't really matter or is, like you said, a little more fun. And then that's usually a good determiner for me, because then if I move on to this little small thing and I take a break with that, and then I usually come back refreshed, or I might get frustrated with the small thing too, and then that's a good indicator for me that it's time to take a break. And then the other thing, this is kind of outside of the studio, but I just think it's really important to have creative hobbies that you're not trying to make money at.
Yeah, I absolutely second that for sure. What do you do? What make the cut for you? Let me guess. Is it cooking? Is it gardening?
I do. I love cooking. I love gardening, and I also love dancing. So for a while there, I was taking ballet classes really regularly. I haven't gotten back into it. I just moved about a year ago, and there isn't a studio near me, so I'm still trying to find the right dance class to get back into it. But yeah, gardening and cooking are big ones for sure. Mhm.
But I think also, but now when I think about those guesses, I also think like for someone like you, like for me, I love cooking. I love cooking, and I love it because it makes me also it's a way for me to connect with my own mom. It always reminds me of her, and I'm always thinking about how she used to cook, and it's also a very intuitive process. I think I inherited that from her. So while I make food, it's not about 2 cups 2 forks, and I'm like, it's in India, it's a very common saying, add salt, like as we say, like, salt to your taste, sugar to your taste. So that's how I tend to cook, like, everything to my intuition. And I'm a great cook actually. And for someone like me, that is a very separate activity from what I do in the studio. But for someone like you, it's a very integrated process because um, let's say you are going in the kitchen or the garden, you're also thinking about how you can make, how this product could be, you know a good dye or a color or be a part of your work. Do you think that, when you're stepping in a kitchen or a garden, it still is a way for you to, it still reminds you or makes you mentally be in that creative space?
Interesting question. I don't think so, especially not with cooking, because with cooking, there's like, I think a big part of it is the social aspect of like cooking for my partner or cooking for friends, or so yeah, that definitely feels more separate to me for sure.
Oh, wonderful. Because for me, I think I've experienced this in my process. Like when I visit, places like textile shops and like, embroidery shops and something, or like, places like these where I still love them, but they always remind me of my work because it's like it's like a mecca, it's like a groundwork for me, and I'm always like, my eyes and my mind is always looking for, oh my god, this would be so great, that would be so great. So even though I feel like I'm moving away from my work and stepping out and diverting, but it's also like constantly I know that it's in the same periphery, then it's just not in my studio, but it's beyond that. Okay, one last question. um what is that one thing that you think has helped you find your, I wouldn't say creative voice or creative style, because I think that's a very different um conversation in itself, but your creative path, in the sense like sometimes I think we feel, there's the exploration of a creative path is one of the most challenging, I think, but also one of the most fulfilling. Like, you don't know what comes next. You don't know, even with the art, I think we make, no matter how much planning we do, there's so much of suspense in the sense of, how something may touch you, feel you, all of that. So, what do you think has helped you the most on your path creatively in your own career, and find yourself that feels like authentic, like true to yourself?
Probably making the switch from using acrylics to natural dyes, mainly because there's just it feels like there's so much to learn, and I really enjoy learning. So I feel like I could continue working with natural dyes for the rest of my life and still not have learned everything there is to know about them, you know? Yeah, there's so much like you mentioned in that reel earlier, where I had dyed that jumpsuit and it just didn't turn out at all how it was supposed to. And I still haven't figured out why. But so it's very much a trial and error process, and I love that because I always find like it's always the moments where you are sort of able to let go of control and just allow the work to unfold a little bit that are the most exciting, and also a little bit scary because you're like, oh, will I be able to do this again? Can I recreate it? So it makes it a little more special and unique. Um, yeah so yeah exploring natural dyes and just like all of the possibilities there are kind of what keep me excited and engaged in my practice.
Yeah. Okay, one last question, one word question, which we've also asked you in the book itself, but I'm also going to ask you. I don't know if you remember what you answered, but one word to define your creative world in. It's a little different than the book, but let's go with that. One word to define your creative world in.
For some reason, the first word that popped into my head was messy. I don't know if that's exactly right. It's messy in a good way.
I was given this question and I had pretty similar answer, and then I was like, you know what? It is messy, but it's like organized mess. Like, I know this is a mess, but I also know how to make my way through this mess. Maybe somebody else wouldn't be able to do that, but I know my way. Isn't like it's so fun how different all of us are, yet how similar we all are. And while we were doing the book, we came up with the idea. We thought like we'll do different interviews and like all of that. And then I realized, I was like, you know what? No, we don't want to do different interviews. With this book, I really want to show people with the same set of interviews and questions how. And I've seen this book through and through, and literally so many times. It's so unique, yet like how the same set of questions can bring so much different in us, the different approaches, how we look at things so differently, and yet those differences can still show how still unified and similar we all are. Like when we asked artists on a woman artist from history they would like to visit, there was so much repetition in the sense of why they wanted to bring someone, even though they were different people, or like your headspace or your studio. And it's very exciting and fulfilling to see that. And I think it's one of the most exciting projects we've done, and I want to thank you so much for supporting us, being a part of the book, and we can't wait to ship out our pre-orders once it's closed. And thank you so much. Before I let you go, do you have anything to share with us, like in the sense of how we can support you, any project? And definitely, let me say, anyone who's interested in, let me plug this quickly. Anyone who's interested in knowing more about Nicole can actually pre order the Studio Visit book. Right now, it's only for a few more days. But apart from this, what else?
I'm actually in kind of an interesting spot right now where I don't really have too many projects on the go. So I'm really just like working on paintings for myself that I'm excited about. So that's been really lovely. I do have an exhibition coming up at a public art gallery here in Vancouver, but that's going to be in about a year. But I'm trying to start thinking about it now because I had an exhibition in the summer of 2022 that I had a year to prepare for, and I procrastinated, and then yeah, so I learned from that, and now I'm trying to give myself the full year to prepare and to make the work for that. But yeah, I guess. Oh, I'm also releasing a collection of small works soon. So if people want to learn more about that and see those works, they can follow me on Instagram, and my Instagram handle is at Nicole Young Art.
Yes. And anyone again? Studio visit book, Nicole. Yes.
Buy the studio visit book.
Yes. And let us know what you think about it and share.
Yes, I'm so excited to get my copy. I had a quick little read through of it in the digital copy that you sent out, but I'm personally, I really love to have a real book to flip through.
Absolutely. Nothing compares to that, for sure. And I think I really, before, even while we were introducing, I was introducing you on the podcast. That's what I was actually getting into. I was like, I really enjoy, like, I really, artists, women, conversations, creative, all of this is my, like, my therapy or whatever you call it. But also, I feel like I love how we transcend, and I always try to carry one experience into multiple forms. For example, like, with your interview, we have it in the book, it has a very different feel, and people can touch it, see you, see the texture, but also have this podcast and the conversation, like, you to take it deeper, to have a sound to it, to to really know that person a lot more deeper. And then also, like, when while we convert this podcast into an article with a lot more journey of for someone who's more interested in on the go and may not be able to listen all the time or touch and carry a book, but also just look at it and look at your pictures and visit from one link to another. And I think we all have different times and zones of why how we want to do it, but also how we all, how there's so much that we can do with just what we create. And you know I don't know, that way. Thank you so much, thank you for your time, and I hope to see you soon again. And thank you for this wonderful visit.
Bye.